Hello, Internet, and welcome back to, I don't call it the Nolan Dean Show anymore. Holy shit, what am I calling this? We'll figure out the title later, but you guys might remember last summer that I had a nice little discussion with another YouTuber, Houston Productions, about creativity, and I said to you that I really want to do that kind of video again. Unfortunately, that video was last summer, and I've been on a bit of a hiatus, but now I'm back with one of the best voices that I've seen in the LGBTQ writing community. Please welcome to the show, AJ White. How you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing pretty great, except for that debacle with the microphone.
Oh man, well, any podcaster knows that microphones just exist to cause trouble.
Yeah, they're the same breed as printers. They smell fear.
Oh jeez. Well, this one definitely does. No matter even if it costs 200 quid. So, as you guys can probably guess from the title of this video, we're going to be talking about LGBTQ rep in fiction, so if one of my subscribers happens to be a homophobe, please just kindly fuck off. I'd hope none of my subscribers are homophobes. Mind you, I don't have a lot of them anyway. So, AJ, I'm just gonna throw it to you. Just introduce yourself, I guess.
All right, so my name is AJ. My author name, I usually go by Andrew Joseph White, which is a bit of a pretentious mouthful, but it sounds cool, so I don't really care. And I write LGBT lit, usually for young adults, usually trans, always very gross and bloody. I tend to have a little bit of a brand. I've been writing since I was before I could actually make letters. I would scribble on pieces of paper and demand that my parents read them.
That's adorable.
And they were like, I don't know what this is. I'm like, it's Thomas the Tank Engine, just read it, And if I don't know what happened, I used to write so much cute stuff. Granted, when I was 6, I wrote a story about unicorns murdering poachers. So that's I haven't changed much. I really haven't, except now it's just trans kids doing the murdering instead of unicorns.
Oh my god.
Your stories are way different from mine, too.
I know, I'm just imagining, one of those weird sci-fi movies where they make beavers, killers, just doing that with unicorns.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, yeah, that is very different from what I do, but the funny thing is, actually, you're one of the first writers that I've met on here who doesn't have an issue with horror. Because a lot of the people I know in the writing community, especially my critique partner Lex, sorry Lex, I'm outing you right now. She's a complete wimp when it comes to horror. Even if I show her a picture of Chucky, she'll freak out.
Oh.
But it's weird because horror is such a creative genre, and I think that even some of the best kids stories have horror elements in them.
Oh, absolutely. Like Coraline, for one thing.
I adore that.
Kids love it and adults hate it. But one of the reasons why I tend to gravitate towards horror, even my fantasy novel has elements of horror in it. My sci-fi novel has it's 90% horror. Is that I'm gonna get right into it. As a trans person, life is scary as hell already. So making it gravitates directly towards horror because having to deal with your body being perceived the wrong way, having to worry about what's this person gonna think of me, is this person in danger, living in that mindset correlates really easily to writing horror because you kind of live in that is this gonna hurt me mindset 24/7. And also body horror, making stuff gross helps with dysphoria because I'm like that. So
oh yeah,
that's one of the
I'm usually quite a big fan of body horror. I adore David Cronenberg movies, Alien, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you did a talk recently with I believe your girlfriend's class. You were in,
Mm-hmm.
which by the way, you and Alice are the most adorable couple I've ever seen on Twitter.
We get that a lot. It's 2 years dating, 6 years of friendship, we know each other pretty well.
It's probably the stuffed animals that get me, to be honest. The ones that you give each other.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
It's kind of funny. We're so soft in person, then here I am talking about writing horror and murdering people.
well, I mean, horror really hasn't been a big part of YA fiction. It's usually like fantasy and sci-fi, but the stuff you're saying, like coming from that perspective of being a trans person, that's the kind of stuff I find really interesting because the best stories I see are the ones where you can see the author's kind of perspective in what they're creating, and that's always fun to read. I mean, you can usually, like, it's almost like you know the author after reading their story from that.
Yeah. Um, it also works really well with just like marginalized communities in general. I know that Ryan Douglas is putting out a book called, I think it's Jake in the Box,
Mm-hmm.
about a black kid at a school, and he's being haunted by a school shooter.
Mm-hmm.
So and I think the school shooter's like even trying to possess him and something like that. So I'm like really excited for that because it deals with like this whole like gun violence thing that we've had, and like what it's like being like, I think what it's like being like a black kid in like a white majority school,
Mm-hmm.
and like having to deal with the horror of all of that. So like that's one I'm really looking forward to. Um and I think it's coming out like next year or this year. I don't know. I just want it really badly. And so you can see that sort of thing in like a lot of marginalized communities, especially like towards horror. Um, yeah, and there are like a lot of YA fantasy and sci-fis, which is kind of funny because I actually am not a big fan of a lot of YA sci-fi and fantasy, which is what I write. But maybe it's just because I'm exhausted by straight people.
Jesus Christ. No, honestly, you're not alone in that. I get that as well. Like, you might have seen I made that whole rant about why Facebook writing groups suck. It's because they're
Hmm.
usually full of, like, okay, this is good. Please don't hate me, internet. It's full. They're full of usually typically southern middle-aged ladies writing their erotic fantasies without much thought anywhere else, and I can probably get into one of the questions that we had there as well. The stuff I usually see when I see trans authors on those pages, like they'll be sharing a element of their story, and it's not even like overly gratuitous or even bloody or anything. It's just sort of like a nice little interaction, and there's going to be a ton of comments saying, "Why does this stuff exist? The writing with pronouns thing makes no grammatical sense," and it
Oh,
just that stuff really annoys me. So I got out of that like real quick.
I can't blame you.
Yeah, and that was one of the questions we got. Let me see who asked that. It was Astra Crompton who asked challenges, tips with working with non-binary pronouns. You've got any tips for that?
I'm actually working with two characters with non-binary pronouns. I have, I think, in an overabundance of soul, my sci-fi body horror story.
Mm-hmm.
I have two characters with they/them pronouns and one character with ze/them pronouns. So we have Alex and Trayvon, and then Salvador. And one of the things that I think for me is just, I think it comes pretty naturally to me. I've been working with at least they/them pronouns for a really long time. Working with the ze/them pronouns is a little new. I find myself putting in the wrong pronouns, and I have to like go back through the scene, rewrite, and change. And that's like the best thing you can do. If you're writing and you mess up the pronouns, just go back, edit it a little bit. Like find a person who actually has those pronouns and be like, am I using this the way that you talk about yourself in conversation? um, a lot of it has to do with like finding someone who actually shares that marginalization and like asking for their help, running it by them and being like, hey, did I do this right?
Yeah, well, I mean that just goes with like any critique partner or like what do they call them, beta readers?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm getting my terms mixed up today. But yeah, that's actually something that I wanted to ask you as well because there's always a lot of talk, especially in our communities, about like if you're not part of this community, then you shouldn't be telling
Mm,
their stories, kind of things. But I also see a lot of people who say, well, if you are not in that community, but your fantasy world doesn't include a lot of these marginalized people, then that kind of tells us a lot about who you are. and that kind of stuff. I mean, it's kind of a weird middle ground to walk between. So I've always gone from the idea of, yeah, have as many different voices as you can in your work. Like, I even try to do that, but just don't try and tell their stories unless you're part of that community.
Absolutely. I say that you can, my usual rule is that, like, you can write lowercase about them, but you can't write uppercase about them, you know?
Right, I get that.
Because, yeah, because the love interest of an overabundance of soul is autistic, for one thing. And, I can, like, have that, I can write about him, but I can't write about him being autistic because that's not my place. Like, that's part of his character, but I can't, like, focus a subplot just on that because, like, what do I know? And, like, trying to, like, say that I know anything about that would be, like, just plain out wrong.
Yeah, well, I think you might have gotten yourself in luck because I actually have mild autism.
Well, there we go.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm actually with some work that I'm doing. This is not on Moonflower, but something that I'm working on right now. It's this story called Oliver Twitch, where I'm planning to have like a trans character and some other characters as well, but mostly writing them just as friends, like people that exist within the world, and just treating it like it's a normal thing because it honestly just is a fucking normal thing at this point. Like,
Exactly.
can we please stop treating it like you've just found a fucking troll under a bridge or some shit? Like, ugh.
I'm the troll. Hi, nice to meet you.
No, you're a lot better than the trolls that I know. Because I'm just thinking of the troll from Harry Potter now. Yeah. But I'll get a little into that. So I showed you a bit of what Moonflower was before we did this thing, and
Yeah.
I didn't really start off writing middle grade either. I wrote YA as well, but middle grade sort of found me in a strange way, because when I started writing, I had just broken up with my girlfriend. I didn't know I was queer yet, and so as a result, a lot of my writing came off as very cynical, like towards the ideas of love and relationships and that kind of thing. And you can imagine a lot of literary agents are like, no thank you. So with Moonflower, I wanted to tell a story where the protagonist was kind of like innocent and sort of nerdy and quirky like I was as a kid, but I did write her straight first, but then once I heard about this whole DV Pit thing, like, I thought, well, now I could actually tell this story from my perspective, make it better, and potentially have it mean a lot to a lot of kids. So that's where that kind of came in. I always saw that story as your thing with horror, like how that's so passionate for you. I have that for bad guys. Like,
oh yeah.
You might have not seen it from the stuff that I gave you, but Moonflower Jones is actually the villain of that story, and the whole thing it came from was, what if you had a fictional character who was pissed off when they found out they were fictional? Because
I mean, I'd be pretty pissed too.
Yeah, I mean, just think like if Harry Potter had a chance to meet J.K. Rowling, he would probably be very angry at her.
Oh, absolutely. Who wouldn't be?
Yes, so, and I've seen stories where fictional characters come to life, like everyone compares Moonflower to Inkheart, which I've never read, but I'd never seen a story where they kind of deal with that psychology of having your life controlled by somebody and not feeling like you have any control over your destiny. And that also kind of goes with what growing up as a queer kid is like. Like, you feel like everyone around you is trying to control you. But with Millie's thing, I couldn't use any like terms like queer or anything like that because it's set in the 80s, and that had a different connotation back then. So, and also she's 11, so she probably wouldn't know what the term is yet.
Yeah.
So I kind of thought, if I can write this story from the idea of not even mentioning certain terms, but just describing how they feel, then anyone could relate to it, and it could become a pretty universally loved kind of story. So, I don't know, there you go. That's like an insight
so
into my brain.
Like, I love that. That's adorable.
Yeah, and I saw a lot of that when I was reading some of your work. Like, usually post-apocalyptic stuff has never really been my thing. Like, my only experience with that is watching Mad Max
Yep. Mm-hmm.
and seeing trailers for like every CW show that exists.
Yeah, that's true. That's legit.
But when I was reading it from your perspective, one, I really love that it reminded me of The Last of Us.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm going for.
Even in the sense they both open with the death of a loved one,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing this world from how I imagine you live as a trans person, that was just really engaging for me. And I'm assuming from what you sent me that Mother is the main bad guy.
Yes, Benji's mom is a terrible, terrible person. She's the one who recommended him for the Seraph project in the first place. So she's the one that was like, "You can use my kid to make this like super weapon." And he was like, "Can we not do that?" But okay. Um, and I've actually, one of the things that I've done is I've given her like explicit TERF rhetoric, trans exclusionary radical feminist like rhetoric. So there's a couple scenes where when they're talking about like his coming out and his identity, she's like, "I understand why you don't want to be a woman. You know, it's hard, but that's part of it. You know, like you shouldn't say that you're trans in order to escape misogyny." And he's like, "That's not what it is. I'm a guy. It has nothing to do with any outside influence. I'm a guy." And she's just kind of like, "I know it's hard to be a girl, but you'll learn to love it someday."
Oh man, I didn't even know that was. I didn't even consider that was coming, and that just adds a whole new layer to what I've already read.
Exactly. And then the whole thing where she's like an omnicidal, like narcissistic, like I don't know, mass murderer. That's on there too.
Yeah, those kind of villains I refer to as the Lex Luthors.
Yeah, exactly. Her thing is though that since she's part of this apocalyptic cult, the Angels, she believes that she's doing the right thing. All of the angels actually believe that they're doing the right thing because they think that humanity has like harmed the earth too much, so it's best to just destroy them all and let the earth start over again. So like she thinks that she's doing the right thing by like telling him it's okay to be a girl. I know that it's hard. She thinks it's okay, a good thing that she's turning him into this giant monster. She thinks it's a good thing that she's trying to help kill all life on earth. And like I the most important thing was to get into her headspace and be like, everybody thinks that they're the protagonist of their own story.
Uh-huh.
I want my antagonists to feel the same way. They feel like they're doing the right thing. And Benji's mom is definitely one of those. And I'm also just throwing, like bigotry rhetoric on top of it, which is always fun.
Yeah, that was. I mean, that you're clearly writing there from your own perspective, and just from how you're describing that, that sounds like something I would want to read. Like that sounds like something I would be like, "Holy shit, that is a really cool idea for a bad guy that I never would have even considered." And I mean, you were showing me some of the stuff with Benji, how he becomes and sort of like an angel, but also kind of crossed with a monster kind of thing. But the imagery you were saying, like, oh, they're actually becoming like an angel. I mean, that kind of went for me with Benji's innocence in the beginning, because he's not like a completely hardened character at the beginning. It's like a really scared kid. And, I immediately just sort of connected to that.
Yeah, like throughout the book, like Benji is terrified. I'm writing a lot of Benji is like me. I put
Mm-hmm.
myself, I'm like, what would I do in this situation? And then realize that curling up in a ball and crying won't get the plot forward, so I have to come up with something else for him to do. So, like a lot of like his softness, his gentleness, like his fear comes from like how I would like live in a post-apocalyptic world. Um, it's lots of very much like, I fought so hard to like get where I am, and now that I know that my becoming a monster is taken out of my hands, how am I going to deal with that? um, and the fact that he actually embraces this monstrousness and uses it as a force for good is one of the things I like about having him be considered a seraph, an angel, because he was created to do terrible things, but he's actually going to like save mankind instead. So that's like the dichotomy between the fact that, like by the end of the novel, he's a 10-foot tall, like flesh monster with a bunch of spikes and 50 teeth and like a 2-foot tongue that can like control a world ending virus. But he's like called Seraph. He's called an angel. So, which he kind of is.
Yeah, and I do love that because when I read a lot of this sort of post-apocalyptic fiction from other writers, a lot of it feels so cynical, but there's a real heart in your stuff. And there's a like I was worried when I read it that first read it that I was gonna read like another hardened sort of I don't care about the world, go away, it's me against the world kind of thing. And I'm glad that you went for this sort of innocence becoming an angel message because I mean that's what I prefer to read. Some people might prefer the hardened stuff, but that sounds like it would be way more uplifting for a trans reader.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if people do see you as a monster, which is fucking wrong and shouldn't happen, then, you can still save the world. You can still be a hero. And I love fiction that does that.
That was actually like really important to me as I was writing it because I was kind of worried when I first got the idea that, having this trans guy turn into like this terrible body horror monster would like give it like a bad rep because you know, like trans people are already like looked down on enough. But also like I realized that this entire book is a power fantasy. And it's interesting to see how like a queer trans power fantasy differs from one that isn't. Because, you get like straight guys, their power fantasies are like getting a bunch of women and like killing a bunch of people and punching them in the face and becoming king.
You just described every James Bond movie.
Exactly. And like a queer or trans power fantasy is like getting to meet people who are like you, becoming best friends with them, creating a community, and being able to protect them from harm. It's not doing stuff for yourself. It's being able to live and help others and be happy while doing it.
Yeah, and I also loved that you had a community sort of thing from the chapters that I read, like, and you can imagine me as a queer dude seeing a whole community of queer people. That just made me really happy. But I also loved that you didn't go for the whole, oh, we're all queer, so we're all just going to get along and be happy friends. There is like some kind of tension between them at first, because that's another thing a lot of straight writers think. They think that, queer people as a whole are just, we all just agree with each other, we're all just wanting to do the same thing, and that's not the case at all. So seeing that you've got different sort of characters within this community who have the same kind of identities, but they might go about certain things differently, that's just more nuanced fiction than, the basic stuff.
Exactly. Like I love this one scene that I have where the non-binary character believes that Benji killed their boyfriend during this large confrontation in like chapter 3, and like immediately attacks Benji for it during the funeral. And Benji goes to talk to Salvador, and Z's like, I know why this happened. And Benji asks them a few other questions, and they're like, what, you think just because we're non-binary we get along? Alex is an asshole.
And that's just way more accurate to real life, though, really, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
yeah.
I know some other queer dudes at my college who are total pretentious dicks, and I don't want to be anywhere near them. Like, I'm just imagining what a yeah, sort of just imagining right now. I mean, I've done this with my critique partner. I'm pretty sure that Millie and Benji would get along pretty well.
You think? Oh, that would be really cute. That would be
well,
cute.
Yeah. I mean, when I was writing her, I was like, okay, if I'm gonna write a nerd girl character, and I base Millie off my little cousin, who's also really kind of like into her superheroes and Star Wars and that kind of stuff. But I didn't want to write like a typical nerdy character, like I didn't want to write Daria, basically.
Yeah.
And so I kind of approached it from, like when I was growing up, I was bullied a lot, and I didn't even know I was queer at the time. So fiction kind of became like my escape, and I sort of relied on it to get like happiness, and that's how I found and related to characters like Peter Parker and Harry Potter and those kind of dudes who they're nerdy, they get bullied, but when they become heroes, they're kind of, the great
Yeah.
heroes. And for Millie, I wanted to take an idea of that and sort of explore the idea like, okay, fiction is a great thing, but you can't just sit about living your life through stories because you're not really
Yeah.
living that way. And so when Millie sees that, oh, maybe I can bring Moonflower Jones to life and she'll teach me how to love myself, it's kind of this whole idea like, I mean, you were talking about power fantasies and that kind of thing. Doesn't every kid kind of imagine what it would be like to meet their favorite character in person?
Yeah, exactly.
And because it's in the 80s, I did send it. It wasn't like that originally. When I sent that to my dream agent, who's still reading it now, she actually gave me the suggestion of why don't you put it in the real world instead of in a fantasy world and have it be like this sort of 80s adventure through London, like a road trip kind of thing. And then, I was immediately brought back to like, the John Hughes movies that I love and that kind of thing. And I thought if I gave it that kind of vibe, it would work. But where it got really interesting was you haven't read it yet, but the moment where Moonflower finds out that she's fictional is one of the most heart-wrenching pieces of writing I've ever done.
Aww.
Because from when she's brought to life, her and Millie really get along because they're like both kind of outcasts, but you can see Moonflower's a little bit more dangerous and kind of more prone to violence than she is because, I mean, she's a little kid. She doesn't really want to hurt anyone. But once she sees so my whole family were killed, all of this happened to me, and that was all because someone was writing my story that way. I'm not happy with that. And that's kind of what makes Millie see, like, holy shit, have I been looking up to someone who's really evil? And that kind of, told you about how my writing came off as cynical before when I started writing it.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to do a similar thing here, because even unconsciously, your personality might come off into your character. And since Moonflower is written by Millie's dad when he was going through a divorce, some of that anger did sort of go into her.
Yeah.
And then it sort of becomes like, okay, my hero's gone bad. I have to either try save her, or I have to try and find the hero within myself. And that's kind of the most powerful thing that I could have written. It's probably the happiest story that I've ever written, and it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I'm not going to use writing to sort of deal with my anger anymore. I'm going to use elements of stuff that I struggle with, but I'm going to use it to empower other queer kids.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that because I'm still working off the anger angle and probably will continue to do that for a while.
I mean, different approaches work for different people.
Yeah. Um, it's funny that you mentioned that because one of the ideas that I'm kind of like working through right now, just kind of like outlining, is I've been calling it like Appalachian Kill Bill.
I saw you speak about this the other day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The one where the trans kid survives a hate crime and tracks down and murders the four classmates who did it. It's such an angry book. It's nothing but anger. And like having to deal with the fact that that anger can be destructive, especially self-destructive, like inwards. But also it's so cathartic. It's so much fun to just like let's just like shove a transphobe through a wood chipper. It's great.
I mean, it's not great for the wood chipper, but
No, yeah, I love that we're worried about the wood chipper. That's the real victim here. But that story is like 100% like based on raw anger, which will be fun to write because I'm very bad at being angry in person.
I can tell that just from talking to you, actually.
Really?
You seem really sweet. You seem like someone I'd get along with.
Yeah, like I'm a very like when it comes to like everyday life, actually like talking to people, I tend to think of myself as being like really sweet, but also like I write stories like the ones that I'm writing. Like Appalachian Kill Bill. Like, come on, what happened?
Well, I mean, that's like. I mean, I go back to what I was saying earlier, that you can tell what an author feels and what they think about the world through their writing. And even though you've got that sort of bloody revenge fantasy elements in your stories, I'm sure. I mean, I like reading that stuff.
Yeah.
I like watching that stuff. I'm one of the few idiots that enjoyed Venom when it came out.
I loved Venom. Ugh.
Ugh.
That movie was tailor made for like just to make it awkward for me to watch it next to my girlfriend's parents. It's like Tom Hardy already, like, okay, we've already got a point here, and then you add a giant body horror monster with a 3-foot tongue and a bunch of teeth. What were they thinking? They knew. They knew.
I mean, were you familiar with the Venom character at all, like beforehand?
A little bit. Like, I knew vaguely of it, but it didn't really hit me how much Venom was my type until I saw the trailer and was like, oh no. Oh no, I have to see this now.
See, that's weird for me because I grew up knowing Venom as a Spider-Man villain, not as like his own character.
Yeah.
But seeing him as his own character and kind of them finding a common ground with this thing that's supposed to be a monster, I can see how that would appeal to you.
Oh, absolutely. Venom is actually one of the comp titles for my body horror novel. Um, it's that and The Maze Runner, I think. That's how I'm comping it. Even though I'm going to be honest, I got 30 pages into The Maze Runner and quit.
I don't blame you.
like, I was like, okay, does this main character have a pulse or like, is he okay? It was just so frustrating to get through, but it's a good comp title. Like, it works, but
Definitely.
it's still really frustrating to get through.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you saw the post-credit scene of Venom, right?
I think so, yeah.
Where it's like Woody Harrelson with the Pennywise hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's setting up a villain, Carnage. I mean, I know Alice is into like comics and stuff. Maybe she can clue you in on that.
Yeah.
But I mean, just imagine Venom, but if he was a raw, bloody, out for blood serial killer who enjoyed what killing people.
So husband material is what you're saying.
Pretty much. I mean, I don't know if I'd want to be married to Cletus Cassidy based on what I've read about him, but
you know what? That's valid. That's valid.
Yeah. I mean, he's basically like Buffalo Bill with a symbiote. So
yeah, I just want the symbiote part. That's all I want. Just like I actually, after I saw the movie, someone needs to hire me as a screenwriter because like having a symbiote with a trans host is like the best story that I can think of. I would write that in a heartbeat. Someone hire me, okay? Like, I will happily write that. I have a story idea, but...
Marvel Comics, if you're listening to this right now, I mean, you draw as well, don't you?
I do. I could have some concept sketches up and going by the end of the month. So, like, I just want to write that so bad. Because, like,
I didn't think when we were doing this, we'd be pitching Venom sequels, but there you go.
Well, that's what you get, you know?
Yeah, and something else I do want to run by you as well, because I am working on this right now. I spoke a little bit about this project before. Did you hear me talk about Oliver Twitch at all?
Yes.
Right, it's sort of like an Edward Scissorhands-y superhero story, because that's also kind of how I felt when I was younger. I mean, I only saw Edward Scissorhands recently, and it was like watching my teen life growing up, because I mean, I didn't have scissors for hands or anything, but I had this feeling that everyone kind of just wanted to get away from me, even though, like, I was nothing but kind to them. So I wanted to write a superhero who was kind of like that, and I have, like, major anxiety, so what if I did his superpower from coming from, like, twitches in his hands?
Oh, that's good.
And then I realized, holy shit, kid escapes from thing, goes to family in London, makes friends, someone tries to kill him. This is Oliver Twist. So I changed it to Oliver Twitch, and I actually included an Oliver Twist reference somewhere in there. And something I do, I mean, you mentioned you were a Stephen King fan when we were talking.
Mm-hmm.
every story I write is in the same universe. So you actually do see Millie in this story, but she's grown up and she's a teacher. It's just for one. It's just one moment because Moonflower's in the '80s. This is in present day.
I love that. I love stuff like that. Oh, I would pull that if I could get away with it, but all my stuff is too scattered around universes. But oh, like I could put like references to it, but that is so cool. I love having the throwbacks to other characters. But also, I love that she becomes a teacher. That's so cute.
Well, yeah, I couldn't really think of any other end for her. I mean, the girl that she does have a crush on, final chapter is her telling her that.
Aww.
And this was something I struggled with a lot with, we'll call them the straight Facebook writing groups.
Mm-hmm.
I even put that in there, like that scene of them telling each other that they liked each other. And even that got like, well, this is for kids. Why are you writing it like this? And middle grade, it's not like when YAs do romances and it's like a lot about the sexual tension and stuff. This is, I mean, you've seen what Millie's like. It's a very innocent sort of crush. And like that is something even I struggled with when I was 11 years old. Like, I don't get why kids can't have that in their stories.
Yeah, it has a lot to do with like purity culture, and especially because like like having like a girl having a crush on another girl or a guy having a crush on another guy is seen as like inherently adult, like inherently sexual, which is the worst. It's so frustrating because like if it was like a girl saying that to a boy, everyone would be heralding it as the cutest thing ever.
Oh yeah, Moonrise Kingdom happened.
And then when it's two girls, it's like, but this is so mature. I'm like, it's an 11-year-old. She's doing her best.
I mean, she has gone through an awful lot. Finding out her hero was a deranged killer.
That's true.
Running away from home, that kind of thing. I mean, just let her have her happy ending, for God's sake.
Exactly. Just let her have it. She's been through enough.
And you also mentioned that I think like you were writing a thing from one of your stories set to a song, but you couldn't do it in the book. You thought if you did it in a film thing. I have that as well for Moonflower.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There's a moment where Millie and Moonflower are in London, sort of just wandering around, and I set it in my head to "Girls Just Want to Have Fun."
Aww. Oh, just think, like when it becomes like one of those really cute PG movies, you can make sure that that's the song that you have playing over that scene.
I've thought for ages how it would be into a movie, and one of the things I definitely would do is make sure Disney doesn't get it.
Oh, yeah, true.
I mean, I love some Disney movies, but they don't have a very good history with LGBT characters.
No, they don't.
Mm. And I don't buy the whole Beauty and the Beast, let's make the one sidekick bad guy the gay rep.
Yeah, that was something.
Ugh. And don't get me started on the whole Jungle Cruise thing. I don't know if you heard about that, but that's fucking mental.
I don't think I actually do.
Their Jungle Cruise, it's like I think Dwayne Johnson's heading it up. They're having their first gay character in it, but it was described as a caricature of sorts and played by Jack Whitehall.
Oh no.
And I think Jack Whitehall's really funny, but I don't want to see him playing that.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, so if it ever becomes a movie, I'm just going to be looking to like Blumhouse or Warner Brothers or something like that.
Yeah, that would be cute. Of course, I'm over here looking at my novels. I'm like, if we want to stick to the spirit of the story, it will have to be R. There are way too many.
Blumhouse could probably do yours pretty well.
Yeah, I'm like, there's just way too many fucks in that book. The main characters swear like sailors, which is completely understandable because everything is trying to kill them. You're gonna say fuck.
I'd probably be swearing a lot too if that was happening.
Exactly. And the whole, like, it's like the explicit sequences where he's turning into a monster. The whole, like, the fact that both the love interests are into that. They kind of have to be in order for the story to work.
I mean, I'm just picturing what the transformation scene could be like now, and whenever I think of transformation scenes, I'm always brought back to American Werewolf in London.
My girlfriend
Still, for
would
my money,
say,
the best transformation scene on film, but
absolutely. It's so good. Of course, my girlfriend's over here like a magical girl sequence. I'm like, no, but also yeah, you know that would be kind of funny. But like there's a whole chapter dedicated to the fact where it's the final stages of the infection and him like going through that because it's a lot of like your spine breaking through your skin and growing 4 feet and like your jaw unhinging. um it's bad. It's very bad. It, like it's not good at
uh,
all. And of course, all of it is told from first person point of view. So Benji is completely delirious with pain, and I'm like, I'm writing for 15-year-olds.
well,
Okay.
I mean that description does remind me a bit of the Incredible Hulk with the Abomination transformation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
and that was PG-13, so
That's
there
true.
you go.
That's true. I think I might have to take some cues from that because that thing is definitely one of things I like because I'm like that. Um,
Granted, I don't want to see Tim Roth playing Benji.
no.
No, Tim Roth is a great actor. Do not cast him as a trans teenager.
Exactly. Let's not do that. One of the things that's actually kind of interesting about like creating like these monsters, because I'm me as a person, I have to like create them specifically so that I find them cute. Like they have to be romanceable in some way. And so like creating Benji was a mix between like how non-human do I want to go and like how disgusting do I want this to be because like I find that cool. Nobody else will. And like like that's absolutely dateable. No one else thinks so. And so I have to like measure that out between like how creepy I want him to be and how monstrous and like how acceptable he'll be as a love interest by the end of the story. I mean, the love interests don't care. One of them's evil, so fuck him. But like Nick, like the main love interest, it has to be believable because like I can see it being like, why would anyone be attracted to this? And just me back here being like, no, that's realistic. But you just don't believe me, do you? No? Okay.
Um, I mean, we sort of like that weird macabre kind of storytelling. It does have an audience. I mean,
Yeah, it
that's how
does.
Tim Burton's had his career for his whole life.
Yeah.
That's what Neil Gaiman does. I could definitely, if that came out with like a trans perspective, I would definitely want to read it.
Yeah. So I'm like really excited for that. It's a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's NYA, and I can see a lot of parents being like, "What the hell is this doing in the kids' shelves?" And I'm like,
Ugh. At least you'd have more of a case. I've got middle grade.
"Oh,
I have to deal with those parents.
that's true." Rest in peace.
That's kind of why I work to make Moonflower kind of like as cute as possible. So you
Yeah.
still have a lot of this darkness surrounding it, because that's. I mean, you notice that I mentioned stars a lot in those chapters.
Hmm.
Like Millie was gazing up at stars. I kind of wrote that as a thing where, well, the darkest nights kind of bring up the brightest moments, and every moment Millie's in the story where it's night, that's usually her braver moments, and any moment in daylight, that's when she's struggling. Like in daylight, she's getting bullied by that girl at school. At night, she's meeting two people from another world and deciding to become a little hero.
That's actually like really perfect though. I love that dichotomy so much.
And there's so much. I mean, even her final battle with Moonflowers takes place at her school,
Oh
because
yeah,
I
that's right.
there's
That's right. You mentioned that. Yeah.
yeah, there's something really cool about kind of oh, this is your primary school. Now someone's trying to kill you while you're running through lockers and everything. I think that's my inner Spider-Man fan, because that's how he fought a lot of his villains in the comics.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Uh, but I mean, I'll probably tell you more about the end of that once we get off this, because I don't want to give spoilers away.
That's true.
But something I also really want to get into before we go to the questions. Basically, what this whole conversation is about. everyone's, even the some people I know are saying, well, if you wrote a gay character or a trans character or a bisexual character in a story now, you're probably more likely to get it picked up because they think like it's some kind of trend. Can we stop this thing where the existence of people different than you is a fucking trend? Because it's not.
Yes, exactly. Oh, it's so bad. It's so
It's
bad.
gotten to a point where I even try and stay away from it on Twitter because I just think it's so fucking stupid.
Like,
Like with that thing that happened with what's her face writing about James Barry.
oh,
Ugh.
the thing that oh God, I was the person who like made the first move because like we were talking about it in our group chat and everyone was like, I'm on sub, I don't want to like look like a troublemaker. There are new agents who are like, I don't want to like put out a bad word, and I'm like, I'll do it because
I'll take
like
one for the team, yeah.
exactly, I have nothing to lose, and it just spiraled. Oh, it was a disaster. Um, like, cause like my girlfriend ended up taking screenshots of how the conversation went down, so she couldn't paint herself as the victim. And like, cause like she was trying to, my girlfriend's like, I have screenshots of what he said. Like, don't try to paint
Mm-hmm.
him in a bad light. And it was so frustrating. It was so much. And of course, it had to happen on Valentine's Day.
Oh yeah, but I mean that's just the universe telling us fuck you, really, isn't it?
Exactly. Like, I got all worked up about this, and my girlfriend was like, okay, I got you a stuffed dinosaur and some chocolate. Just eat it and relax.
I hope you didn't eat the stuffed dinosaur. That's not very tasty. Yeah.
No, but the chocolate was nice. The dinosaur is thankfully unharmed and in one piece and not devoured. But
Mm-hmm.
it was just stunning that that happened on Valentine's Day. And of course, like my girlfriend had to be like, just just chill, like there's other people who are, like taking up like the argument. You can relax. You can relax now, it's fine. All I
But
did
you
was
kind of
ask her if she had a
can't.
trans
Oh.
sensitivity reader, and it just spiraled.
I mean,
So
I saw some of the responses from this author. I'm not going to mention it because I don't want to. I know what some of my followers are like. They'll go after it. It'll create a whole
yeah.
thing. Just leave it alone. But basically, what this writer did, fair enough. Maybe she wanted to write a book about a trans person, James Barry. I didn't know who James Barry was until this whole thing came up. I've since looked him up. But I mean, I get the whole thing of wanting to write something about someone who's passionate about it, like, but writing it from that way and kind of ignoring history when it's a non-fiction story, like,
Hmm.
if it was a fiction thing inspired by this person, I mean, the reaction may have still been pretty bad, but not as bad as it was. But when it's a biography and you're essentially rewriting history, like, I mean, you're not a Quentin Tarantino movie writer. You don't get to just rewrite stuff that exists there.
Yeah, that was a whole mess. And like I'm just glad that it's over with. One of my friends is actually like writing something in response, which I hope he goes through with, about like James Barry as like a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And learning about like medical history and everything like that as kind of a response to this. And he sent me the first like page or so. Oh, it's brilliant. I want it so bad. So I hope someone picks up that story as reparations for what this person did to James Barry's good name. I James Barry is like probably like one of the people I look up to the most because like trans people don't have like a lot of role models. Um, and so like I have to like look into the past for that sort of thing. So there's like James Barry, there's this one Greek mythology figure and stuff like that. Those are like my inspirations more than like actual living people.
I don't blame you there.
That's where we're at.
Well, it's. I mean, if you can find inspiration, you can find inspiration from anything. That's where I think the makings of a good writer is. I mean, I'm one of those writers where I get too much inspiration and my brain kind of can't control it.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
Hard same.
ugh, God, I mean, a lot of stuff happened when I was in the process of writing Moonflower that changed a lot of it. Like, some people were telling me stuff like, "Oh, you should have Millie redeem Moonflower in the end and show her what it really means to be a hero." That's kind of not what I was setting up, though. Like, the whole point I wanted for that story was for kids to read it knowing that, yeah, books and stories are a really important part of your life. They shouldn't be your whole life, because that's going to end up very damaging to you in the end. And, like, even now, like, I read so much when I was younger that I didn't really know how to make real friends,
Mm-hmm.
and because of that, I grew up kind of lonely. So kind of writing through that with Millie was kind of cathartic, because it was almost like me giving myself the happy ending that I wanted when I was a kid.
Aw, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, even
I mean,
now, it's very much like my friends consist of like, like I have my girlfriend and I have people that I'm like friends with, but there's nobody where it's very much like, hey, you want to catch a movie? Hey, you want to go do something? Because I'm just like a very like solitary person a lot of the time. So like having
same.
like those close friendships is like I'm like I don't know what that is. I'm just gonna go pirate Inglorious Bastards or something. I don't know. Like that's my idea of a good time going out with friends. What are you talking about? So
I mean, if you're ever in Glasgow, I have all of the Quentin Tarantino movies on Blu-ray.
ah, I'll get out of America one of these days, maybe.
If you do get out of America, honestly, Glasgow is probably not your best bet. It's freezing. It's Glasgow, basically.
I mean,
Ugh.
yeah, that's how I feel about a lot of America. It's just kind of like, oh, you don't want to go here. It's like this, and it's the town. Like,
Yeah. So, one more thing I wanted to ask you before we get into sort of the questions that we got. Was there any characters or stuff that you read growing up that kind of influenced how you write? Because that's something that I kind of see a lot from writers as well. I think J.K. Rowling grew up reading a lot of like Greek mythology and stuff, and that's how she created the universe of Harry Potter. Is there anything like that for you?
I read 1984 by George Orwell in fifth grade. That
That
would
explains a
do it.
lot.
That would do it. Um, like a lot of those like adult novels that I shouldn't have been reading at the time, like plays a lot into that, and because there's like I have a list of the 25 most disgusting books in the English language, and I'm trying to read all of them. Um, like I have Cows by Matthew Stokoe, I have Hog by Samuel R. Delany, which are just disgusting, bloody, just gut baths. Like they're honestly like really gross. Guts by
Stuff I want to take a shower with after reading.
exactly. Guts by Chuck Palahniuk was a big inspiration. I don't think I can legally say what that short story is about and like not get like sued for obscenity. Like it's disgusting. And like if you combine like the situations of that with like typical YA books, which I'm also a big fan of, that's kind of what you get. Um, I think one of the best ways to explain this is that I read Hog by Samuel R. Delany, which is absolutely disgusting, and also Exquisite Corpse by Proppy Z. Bright, which is also written by a trans guy. And I was like, you know what? I can write something this gross. So in high school, I wrote a little novella called The Bar on 27th Street, which was about the son of a necrophiliac serial killer falling in love with the underage male prostitute his father forces him to see. And they end up like murdering their respective parents and running away. And it was horrific. The book was like it dealt with like like the modern slave trade, and obviously as considering the main character's father, necrophilia. And I wrote this when I was 16 or 17, and I want to rewrite it because it was actually really good. Um, so like That's kind of what happened. I read gross stuff way too early and then combined it with YA, and that's kind of what happened. Um, I know that like stories like Misery, by Stephen King, that was like a big inspiration for me.
I adore that book so much.
I've read it like 3 times now. Um,
My mom gave that to my dad when he was in the hospital for a couple days, and that was probably the worst book that she could have given him.
oh, seriously. Oh, that would be a disaster. But like, yeah, just those really nasty, like over the top gross and like combining it with just typical YA. You were talking about how yours are like Peter Parker and like
Hmm.
characters like that.
Yeah.
You-
Yeah, with that, it was sort of like, well, Peter Parker's my all-time favorite character in fiction,
mhm.
is it's the only one I've sort of 100% related to, and I'm I'm gonna go against the rail here. I'm sorry, Batman fans, but Spider-Man has the best rogues gallery in comics. Like every one of his villains are so freaking cool. They're not all just insane people like Batman's ones are.
Yeah, exactly.
And just it was sort of that accessibility that Peter Parker had to me that I really wanted to replicate with my own stuff. And with Millie specifically, I mean, bits of Peter Parker are in her as well, but also I mostly based that character off of my little cousin, myself as a kid, Matilda, and Kevin McAllister. Because before, when I wrote Moonflower in a third person, Millie was kind of silent and didn't really say much until the story made her do stuff. And then when I wrote it in first person, I found out, wow, she's actually pretty cheeky in real life. Just like how a kid would be. And then it kind of took on this whole different thing. I I grew up loving stuff like Home Alone
Mhm.
and those kind of movies. If and the fact that I could give that kind of vibe to something that I was writing was really exciting to me.
Matilda and Home Alone were like my favorite movies growing up. So those
I'm
are
doing
perfect
a video
comps.
on Matilda too soon. I don't know if you've seen what else I do on this channel. I analyze stories. I'm planning to do one on Matilda this month
Yes. Oh,
because no one has analyzed it, and I think there's a lot of layers in that story.
it I remember when I was at when I had a babysitter in elementary school, it would come up on her TV every other day. Matilda would be, like 4:30 in the afternoon. There was Matilda, and I'd sit down and watch it. Um, I loved that movie. It was so cute. So I'm glad that
Although,
that's one of your comp titles. That just makes me so happy.
yeah, it's a good one. Although it was weird, when I first watched Matilda, that's when I first saw Danny DeVito, and then going back to the whole body horror thing, I then saw him as the Penguin in Batman Returns, and I was horrified.
Oh no. Oh
then that
no.
came. Then that ended up being my favorite Batman movie.
There you go.
And actually, there was another inspiration I had from that for Moonflower. Yeah, you've seen Batman Returns, I imagine,
I
right?
think so. Yeah, I think so.
It's a Penguin and Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman, that
Oh
kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah, the transformation scene of Catwoman in that movie is so heartbreaking and like so tragic. And so I kind of wanted to do that when Moonflower found out she was fictional. So just sort of goes mad and starts swinging stuff around. Because one of the scarier things about her as a character that people don't really notice a lot, Moonflower is a teenager.
Yeah.
She's not like this sort of adult person who you could expect to go evil. She's young. And for that, even the name Moonflower Jones, that's kind of sort of making fun of classic storybook hero names.
Yeah.
And Moonflowers themselves, from what I've seen, they look beautiful, but when you consume them, they're toxic. So that was also helping me write what her character was going to be.
That's smart. That's smart. I love stuff like that.
Literally, as I've rewritten this story so many times that I think there's new layers in it that I've never even discovered until like rereading it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I feel
It's
that.
it's so fun to be a writer. And then back to the whole social media thing, because you brought that up. That's something I'm doing in all over Twitch with the new villain there. You know who Tom Holland is, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the most adorable dudes in
Oh,
Hollywood right now.
absolutely.
Let's be honest. I based him off. I based my new villain off of him.
Really?
There's this character I've created called Kevin Knight, who's kind of like a social media star. And when he sees the Oliver Twitch character, he's got superpowers and stuff. He's like, okay, I'm going to take you and I'm going to make you famous and I'm going to help you find the stuff that you want. But then it's sort of like this, your motivations are different than mine. I'm going to have to end up facing you. And it's kind of like, one of my favorite castings is Anthony Michael Hall's as the villain in Edward Scissorhands, because we knew him as like a nerdy dude in the 80s, and then he's being this jock later on.
Yeah.
So that's where the whole Tom Holland thing kind of came from, and that's something else I do as well. I take good archetypes and twist them into bad guys, because I think there's something more scary about a villain that doesn't look evil.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Like the people I've thought to play Moonflower Jones are like Dakota Fanning, Selena Gomez, and Miley Cyrus.
Absolutely. Oh, that's good.
And someone brought it up to me. They thought Maisie Williams as well, but I'm like, we've seen her as Arya. That might be a bit too obvious.
Yeah, that's a little extra.
Yeah. Do you ever do that for your stories? Like, think of actors in your characters' roles, or do you see the character first?
I see the character first. Although every now and then I will see someone who I'm like, that's kind of what they look like. Granted, it's kind of hard because a lot of my characters are like they're trans or they're like people of color, and especially because they're like teenagers. So like Benji would be really difficult. But for someone like Nick, the one of the characters in the Maze Runner movies, I'm like that actually looks a lot like him. So that might be
Was
what
it Will Poulter by any chance? Was it Will Poulter?
I can't remember his name.
He's got the eyebrows. That's what everyone called him back then.
No, it's not him.
All right, not eyebrows, dude.
Yeah, let me.
He was gonna be Pennywise at one point.
Was he?
Yeah, before the other dude was cast, Will Poulter was who was gonna play him.
Huh. Oh, I looked up his name. It's Ki Hong Lee.
Oh yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, so I'm like, he kind of looks like Nick, he passes for like 17, 18. So I'm like, he kind of looks like Nick. Also he just has like a nice face in general. That's
True.
a plus.
He is very handsome.
He is. So I'm like, that actually like looks like the love interest of my book. Although it would actually be kind of funny for like one of the antagonists. I want like a really sweet mother figure to play like Benji's mom. So like whoever played the mom in Love, Simon.
Oh, I know who you mean, but I don't know her name.
Yeah, exactly. So something like that. And also you can get any bland ass white boy to play the bad love interest. That's just how that works. He just needs to be conventionally handsome. And
so Timothy Chalamet.
Yeah, we could go with that. Just make him blonde, and like we can make him evil. And why does my cat keep doing this?
Your cat just loves you. That's what cats do.
Exactly.
Oh jeez.
But so like like Timothy, that would be like perfect for him. But like Benji, I want to get like a new actor, like off the ground, like actually 16, actually trans.
Like an unknown.
Yeah, exactly. Very good at acting like he's just been shot in the head.
Just walking around with a kind of like a bobblehead. Like...
Yeah, exactly. Because like Benji is actually a really old character. I've had him since high school, and in the first iteration of him, he gets shot through the eye and survives. And he spends the entire book with like half of his face, like just like a bloody gore-soaked mess. And I'm like, I can't do that with this Benji, but the spirit of it is there. Like it's there in heart.
I absolutely adore that stuff. Okay, I think we can head to some of the questions that we got now. We didn't get much, but we got some really interesting ones. Natalie Cannon, I believe her name is. Oh yeah, since James Barry needs justice. Wow, we were just talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any trans ancestors that you'd be interested in writing about? Maybe a time travel horror. I'm a big Doctor Who fan. I would love to see a time travel horror story.
Yes. Definitely the one that I was talking, one of the ones I was talking about earlier. I don't know how to pronounce his name. It's like Canis or Sanius or something. And he's,
The Greek mythology one.
yes, the Greek mythology figure.
Okay.
Um, in in mythology, he was assaulted by Poseidon, and then asked to have the body of a man so nothing of that would ever happen again. And he becomes like one
Right.
of the great heroes, like helping Hercules and stuff like that. And like I'd love to write a version of that where it's, like it's not based on the trauma he's actually trans, but I would love to write a version of that because Greek mythology, like it can be really dark and bloody sometimes, and also just give me every trans protagonist, please. So
It can also be really sweet as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I
My only experience with Greek mythology is Percy Jackson.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
But from what I've heard, Rick Riordan in his later work has like a lot of trans and other marginalized characters as well. I haven't read them, but from what I've heard, he's doing a good job.
Oh yeah, he's been doing a great job with it actually. I don't know if it's the Norse one. I can't remember. Um,
It might be actually Magnus Chase, maybe.
I
I
think
don't know.
so because my girlfriend was telling me about how there's a gender fluid character who's handled very well.
Oh yeah, I think that was his version of Loki.
Yeah, one of Loki's
Yeah.
kids. That's right.
Oh, well, I just love Loki anyway because Tom Hiddleston's really handsome.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
Completely understandable.
all right, and we also got from Natalie top 5 things you'd like to see more in portrayals of trans people. Well, that's your department.
That is my department. Um, One of the things is probably can we stop getting can we stop getting cis actors to play trans people? Can we do that?
Scarlett Johansson, stop it.
Exactly. Like it's really frustrating because I think that like there's supposed to be like a movie about James Barry coming out who's being played by like Rachel Weisz or something. I'm like
Oh no, oh no.
it's terrible.
Oh,
Um
I really like Rachel Weisz too.
that's the problem, right? So like stuff like that. We get like well, just like more in general because right now we have Laverne Cox and that's it. Like I love
Yeah,
her.
I can't think of any other like big name trans actors other than her.
Exactly. I think like I don't know, is Chaz Bono even an actor? I don't know what he does.
I don't know.
And then of course like for trans men we have Buck Angel, the porn guy.
I think there was a pop star I think who's a trans man, Charisse back in the day.
I can't remember. Like
Uh,
I'm granted I'm 20 and only like plugged into like modern culture 5 years ago, so I'm a little out of date.
I don't suppose you ever watched Glee when you were younger.
Nope.
Okay, because I think that's where that kind of came from. I know there was a trans character on Glee, but I'm not sure if it was a trans actor.
Yeah. It's like
But
so
there was also another character who then came out as trans later in real life, and it was Charisse,
yeah,
I believe.
I can't put a face to the name, but it sounds kind of familiar. All right, so we have
Mhm.
like trans actors playing trans characters, more trans actors, um, more trans roles, for one thing.
Mhm.
Because I remember like years ago there was this movie trailer that I saw that it was about a trans guy, like a teenage trans guy having to like deal with like his divorced mother and father. And like I never heard about it again, and my girlfriend was like, yeah, it was completely repackaged into like a family drama, and where like the trans character was like made like a side point. And so there's like no major roles for us, and when they
Mhm.
are for us it's nothing but our transness, um which is so frustrating. um because like like the two novels that I'm working on now, like it's not about being trans, but it influences the plot, but it's not about it. um which I think media could learn to could stand to learn from like any situation, like any marginalization. You know, you're more than that, but it's also a part of you. It's just something they could stand to learn in general. Um,
There's also something from that, like everyone's always say I'm sick of hearing this, but everyone always says there's no original stories anymore.
mm-hmm. Ugh.
And I think giving like LGBTQ perspectives, like trans perspectives and gay perspectives and queer perspectives on like stories that we know, those perspectives will change the story slightly and make it original.
Yeah.
Like I think of something like The Big Sick that came out 2 years ago.
Oh
Pretty
yeah.
standard rom com, but from the perspective of it being from a Pakistani man, that made it different. It made it fresh, and it made it really funny. And Kumail Nanjiani, also just a delightful dude.
Absolutely. It's like you see people like declaring these genres done when marginalized people have never even gotten their hands on it. It's like you're missing half the puzzle, you know?
Oh, there is I don't know if you watch Supergirl, but I believe now there's a trans superhero on that played by a trans actor.
I'll have to ask my girlfriend about that because she knows more about TV than I do. But that'd get me to watch it, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I think I've heard people talk about it only for this season though, like season 4. I don't know the actor's name, but I know there's a transgender superhero on it.
Yeah. That's like the fourth thing that I think media needs to learn. If there's a well written trans person in it, I will read or watch anything. Like, I'm usually very much like an action dystopian. Like my favorite movie is Mad Max Fury Road. And you know, like I'm not a fan of rom-coms. I'm not a fan of comedies. But if you put a well-written trans person in it, I will watch anything. So like that's something they need to learn because I will absolutely do that. Um, I don't know if I have a five. I've just been ranting about movies. um,
I guess I could add something that I'm sick of from seeing just from LGBT characters in general. Stop adding them just to make your straight characters look better.
mm-hmm. Yep,
Ugh.
absolutely. That one trope
Like,
where they walk in on the trans character like undressed and they're like, "Oh God, I'm so sorry. I won't reveal your secret." I'm like,
Jesus Christ.
I
Ugh.
hate that. It's like it's the year of
Ugh.
our Lord 2018. Can we get over that now? Like,
There's also something I'm really sick of, is having characters exist in these stories that exist purely to be bigots and nothing else.
mm-hmm.
Like, you mentioned Love, Simon. There's those two teens in it who just exist to say bigoted stuff. And anytime they were on screen, I was just like, "Will you guys fuck off?"
Yeah, exactly. Like one of the best ways to portray bigotry is the fact that it's not just in a person who's like nothing but a bigot. You know, it's in people who you're close to. You know, people who don't seem that way, and that's what hurts the most. If you want emotional impact, go for someone you give a shit about.
Yeah, yeah, I'd agree with that as well. And I don't know what this means, but soft ETAs on when your books will come out. I have no idea what ETA means.
Estimated time of arrival.
Ah,
When do you
right,
think
fair enough.
Moonflower will come out?
Well, it's still I'm still waiting on a response from Dream Agent. I won't reveal her name, but if that goes well, it might be pretty soon. I don't know how fast middle grade books go into like the editing process, but as I understand, it's shorter than YA's.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So like
Yeah.
a year?
I've thought about an ideal year I would love it to come out around in. Ideally 2020 and LGBT History Month, like because that's also around summertime. It's a story set at summer,
Oh, that would
and
be
also
wonderful.
by the odd chance that I would get invited on the Graham Norton show where the Wonder Woman 84 stars are also there.
Absolutely. Hmm.
Uh, Hopefully Moonflower's coming soon with Oliver Twitch. I have no idea because I'm still writing it.
Yeah.
Uh, with yours, and I mean you're in the querying process now, right?
I'm actually still redrafting. Um, because I am on the second draft right now, but the second draft has gone through like four or five different iterations. But I'm actually like pretty close with a few agents, and we've kind of been talking back and forth, and it's just kind of like I know one of them I'm really close to is just keeps saying, when I get my hands on your book, I'm like, sir, are you offering me representation or not? I'm not even done, you know? So I'm like, don't psych me out like this, man. Um, but I want to have this draft finished by the end of the semester because
Mm-hmm.
like I need to turn in like 80 pages of it for my capstone to graduate anyway. Um, and so hopefully I can have like that draft done by like the end of the semester, end of summer, and like go into querying sometime around the new year.
Right.
So if everything goes smoothly, it would be around 2021. Um, but I have my fingers crossed. So, and anything else after that would probably be like, because I work on like three different projects at a time, which is hell. I don't know why I do it, but
We all do that.
it's very
Trust, that's
much
just a writer thing.
exactly. It's very much set up that I'd have like after that point, after that initial querying, I could do one a year if it came down to it. I'd be happy to do that. So
It's a little different for me because I'm not one of those writers where it's gonna be like, oh, we got Moonflower. When are you doing Moonflower 2?
yeah,
Like, because that I kind of can't work like that. For me to tell a story, it has to be something worth telling. And the way that I've ended Moonflower, it's very much like a standalone narrative where if there is going to be a sequel, there's I'll happily do it, but the story has to work. Like I can't just be like, oh, Moonflower has returned and now she must fight her again.
exactly. Like I write standalones too. Because I just don't work with in a series mindset, kind of like you. Like
I've
yeah,
I've tried writing trilogies before and they never come out the way I want them to.
exactly. I need to contain like the entire thing in one narrative, and especially when like series are really popular. Ugh,
Oh
but
yeah.
what can you
I
do,
mean,
right?
fair enough to the writers who can do that. I'm just not one of them.
Exactly. Same. Like I have a trilogy in mind, but I don't know how it would work out, and it's just right now it's just a mess. Something I tried to write in high school, but like I have the idea on paper, but I don't know if I could pull it off.
Yeah, I have a few things where it's like I said before, you might see certain characters from stories pop up again in other ones, but it won't be like, oh, here's Millie again as like an adult. Let's see what she's doing as a protagonist now.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
her story is really when she's 11 and comes out to her parents and that kind of thing.
Yeah, like that's the whole story.
And I imagine it'd be the same for Benji's story. It feels very standalone.
Yeah, like I might do like a short story that shows what it's like, like after he settled into, like the final form of the monster and the big confrontation is finished and they settle into their new home and like maybe like a short story like of just talking about like, what happens to the horror protagonist after the horror is done, you know.
I'm just picturing what that would be now. Just like the monster just walking to the grocery store. Like
Big old monster. I'm gonna go shopping, guys.
I'm just picturing Dazed and Confused with monsters.
Honestly, yeah. So I might do like a short story like that, but like when the book is finished, Benji's story is pretty much finished. There's nothing else for him to do, or if there is, but it's like not like book worthy because it's very much, like after a disaster, you have to do reconstruction. And the reconstruction
Yeah.
is just that. It's just reconstruction. There's like it's like trying to find paper towels and like get a water source up and running. It's nothing like glamorous or romantic that you'd put in a YA novel.
No, it's not. And it probably works better as a standalone story given the whole context.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And once again, I kind of want to see more of it now because of how you've described your bad guy, because that sounds so freaking cool.
Yeah, Benji's mom is something. She's
Yeah.
she's a piece of work.
I mean, I kind of have that in Moonflower as well. Millie doesn't get along with her mum very well,
Yeah.
but it's not to that extent. It's more she just doesn't understand what her daughter's like,
Yeah.
and it's actually, I mean, I'll tell you more of this after we're done, but it's different than how you've done it, basically.
Yeah. Also, Millie's dad is
Okay.
still alive. You know,
Yeah,
didn't get
thankfully.
didn't get popped by a kill
Well,
squad.
well, that I almost killed him off.
Really?
The final confrontation was almost going to be Millie back at her house, and she goes there, and her dad's tied up, and Moonflower's there,
Oh.
and she's just like, "Now you're gonna know what it's like to have your family taken away from you."
That sounds like her is the thing. That's very Moonflower of her.
Yeah, she. I mean, it was kind of fun to write a protagonist who was sort of deliciously evil, but exploring the sort of humanity of it, that's kind of where I do my best villain work. Like, you have to really buy why a villain is doing something.
Exactly.
And sadly enough, I can buy why Benji's mother is doing what she thinks she's doing. I don't like why she's doing it, but that's a thing we've seen.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And you've got another work in progress as well, Thousand Kinds of Fur, kind of like a fairy tale retelling.
Yeah, it's a retelling of the German fairy tale Allerleira, which, you know, in the original story, like the queen of the kingdom dies, and the only person who can like fulfills all of the qualifications for the next queen is the king's own kid, and the king's like, you have to marry me. The kid's like, no, and runs away to a neighboring kingdom and falls in love with the king there, and it's really sweet. Although if we can ignore like the blatant assault and like forcible incest undertones. And so as I was reading it, like I talked about in kind of like my semi lecture, as I was reading it, I was reading it through the lens of a trans person, and I'm like, what if we made the protagonist trans? And that's what I did. And now it's also includes like a bunch of blood and guts and like evil huntsmen and a cruel nature god and a bunch of body horror, because I'm predictable like that.
Well, from what I've seen from how you shared it, there's one line particularly that sticks out to me, and you've shared it quite a lot. It's the "Don't let my body fool you, I am a prince."
Yes. Oh, that's my favorite line. Oh, I'm obsessed with that line. It's so good.
I've got one of those for Moonflower as well. Like, it's near the end where Millie's trying to like plead with her and like try and make her not go evil, and she's like, "Yo, your parents' death was an accident. Don't do this." And Moonflower just turns to her and goes, "It's the funny thing about stories. There are no accidents."
Oh, 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 that's so good.
This book's like my baby, just like how I imagine Benji's
Oh
story is like
yeah,
your baby.
he's my baby. Big, nasty, drooly, bloody baby, but baby nonetheless.
Yeah, well, parents love their kids no matter what.
Exactly.
Even if it's from a really skewed perspective, Benji's mom. But yeah, I think that'll more or less we can wrap it up there. Thanks so much for joining me, dude. This has been a really fun discussion.
Of course, it's been awesome. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So you anywhere people can find you, your sheriff on Instagram, your people on Twitter, like because I've been mentioning you to the people that I make content with as well, and hopefully they can follow you after this too.
Oh yeah. So my Twitter handle is AJ White Author. All one word. I don't think capitalization matters for that sort of thing. That's pretty much my main go-to. If you want to find anything I'm doing, it'll probably be there.
Okay, and as always, you guys can find me at NolanDean27. Stuff coming out to the channel now. I'm still editing that video on how to train your dragon. That should be coming out pretty soon. And as I mentioned before, the next Stories as Lessons will be about Matilda. No one's ever analyzed the themes for that, so what I'm focusing on, I think the main power in that story is the power of empathy, and how reading stories makes you empathetic. So I'm excited. I'm going to look at Matilda through that lens. But more or less, I think that'll wrap us up. So if you guys love this kind of stuff, tell me who I should be talking to next, and always hit the subscribe button, comment down below, follow us on Twitter, and I'll see you guys next time.